Hello everyone and welcome to podcast again for another week. Got to be honest with you, I'm feeling a little bit tired this morning, but I still find when I do an episode and it's start talking about this sort of stuff, it generally picks me up a little bit. It lifts my spirits and gets that connection and my vibrations a little bit higher, and it's just a fun thing to do, I guess, to pass the time is read about this stuff. So bear with me if I sound a little bit lethargic and it's not my and I'm a little bit below par today, but I'll do my best and we'll get through it. So let's get into it. This one is from enderf.org, and it is from a guy called Mohammad Z. And let's begin his experience. I'm 65 years old, and this happened to me in 1977 when I was 26. I'm originally from the city of Isfahan, which is central Iran, about 300 miles south of the capital Tehran. I had followed a friend's suggestion and taken a job in the city of Mashhad, which is in the northwest of Iran, about 800 miles away from Isfahan. That day, I was driving back from Mashhad to Isfahan for a few days of vacation and visiting my family. I left very early in the morning, around 2 a.m. Back in those days, the roads were not as good as they are now and was not a highway, just a two-way road. At some point along the way, when I was close to the city of Guchan, I noticed a car from the other lane was in my lane and the headlights were beaming right towards me. I tried to steer to the right to avoid a collision, but the road shoulders were so narrow. I collided head on with that car. My car spun a few times and fell off the road, which was several feet lower than the road itself. I was critically injured, but luckily, a few minutes later, a passenger bus was passing by and saw the accident scene and stopped. They took me to a hospital in the nearby city of Guchan. In the hospital, the doctors and nurses started working on me right away. I had many injuries and felt severe pain all over my body. Nevertheless, when I was on the operating room bed, various thoughts were rushing through my head. For example, I was worried that if I don't report my work on time in a few days, they might give my job away to someone else. At the same time, I was very angry at my friend who had encouraged me to take this job in a city far from my family. I blamed him for living away from my family, causing my accident and misery. I was frustrated at everything and everyone. I felt that this world and my life was a total mess, and nothing was in its right place. My mind was full of complaints and anger. I was not anaesthetized and didn't go into a hospital. I remember a young woman around 22 years old enter the room. She seemed to be inexperienced and rather new to the hospital. She looked beautiful, and I wished I was not in this mess so I could talk to her and befriend her. But once again, I was distracted by unbearable pain and all the angry thoughts that were playing in my head. My attention was constantly shifting from my pain to my angry thoughts, to this young lady, back and forth, round and round. Suddenly I felt that everything shifted. I felt a deep calm and peace engulfing me. This feeling was totally opposite to what I was feeling a few minutes ago. I was not angry anymore, and I was seeing perfection in everything in the world and around me. Now I was feeling that everything is exactly the way it should be. Whenever I focused my attention to an object or subject, I could get a deep and complete insight into that matter. I could even understand the chemical composition of objects I looked at and all its physical and mathematical properties. I shifted my attention to that young woman again. She seemed a little different than a few minutes ago. I noticed that I am seeing her like 360 degrees around her, like I have totally engulfed her. I could see her thoughts and feelings as well. In fact, I felt that I am present in this entire hospital. I could see that she had a lot of sadness and worry about what she was seeing. She was thinking that it was so sad that this young man is dying like this. I tried to soothe her and tell her that I am all right and that nothing is wrong with me. In fact, I've never felt so good in my life. But she kept ignoring me, like she does not see or hear me. I noticed that she was staring towards a fixed point. I followed the direction she was looking and noticed that she is looking at the body of a young man who was lying on a bed. I was shocked because this man had striking similarities to me. I wondered who he was and why does he look so much like me. I even thought that maybe I have a twin brother I didn't know about who happens to be in the same hospital at the same time. I tried to tap on the shoulder of the young woman to get her attention, but my hand simply went through her body without any resistance. I was so puzzled. I looked at myself and saw that I had a transparent and illuminated body. I was so confused and bewildered. I started to think to myself, am I dead? Is this my body on the bed? My God, my mum would be so devastated. She is expecting me back home tomorrow. As soon as I thought about my mum, I immediately found myself in front of her in our house in Isfahan. It's hard to explain, but strangely, I was still in the hospital too. I was aware and seeing everything there as well, without any difficulty and confusion. My presence at home did not decrease my awareness and presence in the hospital at all. It was like I had split into two pieces with equal awareness. My mum was sitting on the patio and preparing some vegetables for the dinner. I went behind her to hug her from behind in order to surprise her. Again, to my surprise, my hands went right through her body. I tried to talk to her, but she did not pay any attention to me. During this period, as I thought about various friends and relatives, I instantly went to them while present in previous places of the hospital, home, etc. For example, when I thought about one of my teachers, who I loved so much back in the days of high school, suddenly I was beside him. While still in the hospital and also in my house at Isfahan beside my mum, I could immediately see all thoughts, feelings, and all the things that were going on for him in life, such as his thoughts, concerns, financial status, and health. I saw that I am no longer in his thoughts and heart. I could see that at any moment he was worried about his son, so I lost interest in him and left that scene. I thought about a few other relatives and friends, and similarly I visited them as well. In every case, I tried to communicate to the person I was visiting, and make them aware of myself, but to no avail. I realized that there is no use trying to communicate with people. Nobody could hear or see me. Meanwhile, I was seeing everything in the hospital. Over there, the doctors pronounced me dead and wrote some notes on my chart. Resuscitation unsuccessful. The patient is pronounced dead at ... They threw a sheet on my face and put another bed on the wheels. And put me on another bed with wheels. Then they transferred me to a room where they temporarily kept the dead before sending them to a hospital morgue. At some point through my experience, I passed very fast through a tunnel and moved towards a bright light at the end of the tunnel. I cannot accurately place when this happened in my experience, as time has lost its meaning. I went to a very pleasant place that was made from light. I felt that this was my true home and I belonged there. My presence on earth looked like a deportation to a stranger, an isolated island that was compatible and unpleasant. Where I was now, there was no past or future, no close or far, no ups or downs, no dark or light, and all the relative things had lost their meaning. Everything seemed to be in absolute perfection. There were other souls there too, some with more light and possibilities than me, and some with less. I never felt envy towards those who were more advanced and who had more light than me. It was well understood that each of us were where we should be according to our own capacity and growth. I had no bad feelings whatsoever that I am less advanced than some of the other souls. When I was visiting my mum and some of my friends and relatives, I had a vague feeling that there is a presence that was following me all the time, like a shadow. I was so absorbed in the wonder of this whole experience, my thoughts, what was going on, and those people I was visiting that I really didn't pay attention to that presence. Eventually I noticed him. He was an amazing, divine, human-like figure who radiated lots of love and light. Instantly I fell in love with this holy and immensely beautiful presence. I noticed that he loves me deeply and unconditionally. First I thought he must be a prophet or some religious figure, but then I thought he is even above all that. I realized that he had always been with me throughout my life. Always. He was my guide. I got the understanding that everybody who dies has a guide, but some humans are so attached to their physical and material world that they still worry about their money, possessions, or power even after death. They don't notice their guide and might not even notice that they are dead. Their soul can stay earthbound for a long time after their death. For example, my guides showed me a man who apparently used to be in a position of authority and power back on earth. After this man's death, he still went to the office he used to work in, tried to sit at the same chair and sign documents. He was oblivious to the fact that his signature does not leave any marks, and he has no power and effect in the physical world. He kept going to that office, trying to sign these things and act as if he was still working there, not realizing that he is dead. I got this understanding that any strong earthbound attachment can keep our souls from soaring. I saw people who had committed suicide, and they seemed to have the worst situation among all these earthbound souls. They were completely trapped and had no way of communicating to anyone. Sometimes these souls would follow their loved ones on earth, like a shadow for many years, begging for forgiveness for the hurt and pain they had caused by their suicide. But it was no use, and they wouldn't be heard. My guide showed me these scenes. Then he showed me a different kind of scene. Scenes that formed in front of my eyes like a movie. They were scenes from my own life. The scenes were in chronological order from the very beginning of my life on earth. I saw a young woman who was pregnant. She was my mother and was pregnant with me. I entered her body like a wave. Before entering her body, I was feeling that I am present in the entire universe, that somehow part of me focused away from this entirety and totality to move into the physical world and my mother's body. My feeling was the feeling of connectedness. I felt that everything is connected to everything, and there is no beginning and end. I cannot tell for sure in what stage of pregnancy I entered her body, but I think it was a long time before delivery. One example of my life review was when I was a little kid. We were travelling by car and stopped somewhere along the way. There was a river not far from the road, and I was asked to go and bring some water in a bucket from that river. I went to fill up the bucket, but on my way back, I felt that the bucket was way too heavy for me. I decided to empty some of the water to make the bucket lighter. Instead of emptying the water right there, I noticed a tree that was alone by itself in a dry patch of land. I took the effort to go out of my way to that tree and emptied some of the water at the tree base. I even waited there a few seconds to make sure the water is soaked into the soil and is absorbed. In my life review, I received such an applaud and joy for this simple act that it is unbelievable. It was like all the spirits in the universe were filled with joy from this simple act and were telling me, "We are proud of you." That simple act seemed to be one of the best things I had ever done in my life. This was strange to me because I didn't think this little act was a big deal and thought I had done much more important and bigger things. However, it was shown to me that what I had done was extremely valuable because I had done it purely from the heart, with absolutely no expectation for my own gain. Another example of my life review was when I was a 10-year-old boy. I had bullied and mercilessly beaten another boy who was also around my age. He felt tortured and deeply hurt. In my life review, I saw that scene again. The boy was crying in physical and deep emotional pain. As he was walking in the streets crying and going back home, he radiated negative energy which affected everything around him and on the path. People and even birds, trees, flies received this negative energy from him, which kept propagating throughout the universe. Even rocks on the side of the street were affected by his pain. I saw that everything is alive, and our way of grouping things in categories of alive and not alive is only from our limited physical point of view. In reality, everything is alive. I felt all of the pain and hurt that I inflicted upon him inside of myself. When this boy went home to his parents, I saw the impact that seeing him in that state had on his parents. I felt the feeling and pain it created in them and how it affected their behavior from that point forward. I saw that as a result of this action, his parents would always be more worried when their son was out of the home or if he was a few minutes late. I saw that whenever I'd done something good to anyone or anything, that I had done it to myself. And whenever I'd hurt someone, I'd done it to myself by actually doing that person a favor because they would receive some form of compensation or help from the universe as a result. this universal gift would be bigger than the damage that I caused them. I wanted to stay in the world of love, peace, and light, but they reminded me of my responsibilities back on Earth. I argued and refused to return. They told me that if I don't return, I wouldn't be able to achieve certain spiritual capabilities which I would have received had I gone back to Earth. I still didn't want to return and would rather stay there. Finally, they showed my parts of my future and how, if I returned, it would affect many other people and help them to see the light. When I realized how much my return to Earth would help others, I could not wait to get back to Earth. However, these scenes from my future were erased from my memory upon my return to Earth. According to my medical documents, I came back to life 32 minutes after I was pronounced dead. But during this 32 minutes, I saw so many things. It was like several months to me, if not several years. One of the staff in the hospital who was passing by the room my body was in heard a little noise coming from inside the room. She rushed into the room and found that I was actually breathing again. For years, I hid my experience from people because whenever I talked about it, I faced their ridicule, negative judgment, or accusation of hallucination and making up stories. After several years, I saw a book about NDEs and noticed there are other people who have similar experiences like me. Although the detail of their experience might be different or they might express their experience in a different way, we still have the similar experiences. After seeing this book, I was very anxious to find others who had an NDE and to meet them face to face. I even changed my job and started to work in medical services section of a hospital to meet other NDEs. Gradually, NDE phenomena became more known and accepted in the society. People became more open to hearing my story. Nowadays, on average, I tell my story once or twice a month to various gatherings of friends or people who are interested. Unlike the past, now people, and especially young ones, show a lot more interest in hearing about my experience, and it seems it affects them in a good way. That's the end of Mohammed's experience. So there's a couple of things there that leap out to me straight away. Number one, that was a really cool experience. I like the way this guy's written it. It was easy to read, made a lot of sense, had a lot of things in there that, I wouldn't mind going through again, like I'm going to in a minute, and take them apart a little bit more, get into them in a little bit more depth. And secondly, he is a man from Iran, which is fantastic. It is so good to have a experience from a non-Western perspective, just to see and to be reminded, I guess, that these experiences are universal. They're not tied to a particular religion or a particular culture or country. It can happen to anyone from any race, from any background, from any religion. And yeah, this is another reason why I thought this experience had a fair bit to offer. So let's go through it again. So he's right. This experience happened in 1977. So 45 odd years ago. But he is writing this, and he had this experience when he was only 26, and he's writing it as a 65-year-old. So it's taken him a while to get this down on paper, but like I just said, for the reasons I just mentioned, I'm glad he has. So he's driving along, and he's on a road that he says back in 1977 was below the standard we see roads at today. It was narrow, poorly sealed, and only 2 lanes. And as he's driving along this road, he sees a car coming in the opposite direction on the same side of the road as him. And because the road's so narrow, he can't avoid it, and he hits this car head on. And the NDE starts with him, waking up in a hospital in his spiritual form, but he isn't aware of this. He thinks he is still alive, to the point where he starts trying to communicate with people with the expectation that they can still hear what he's saying, and they can still feel his touch. But obviously he quickly begins to notice that people, even though he's talking to them, aren't responding. It appears that they're ignoring him, and he tries to, touch their shoulder to get their attention. And when he does that, he notices that he is in a translucent type body. I guess when I read that, I thought, well, that sort of reminds me of the cartoons and what ghosts are drawn as in those shows. And that's just the sort of picture I'm getting in my mind. But he has a few extra abilities. He's not only no longer in physical form, he has the power to think about someone, and instantaneously his awareness travels to that person. But he starts off this experience, he notices this really attractive young 22-year-old, and his first impressions, his first thoughts are to, I don't know, I guess go and chat her up. Is that the right term? He's only 26, so they're a similar age, and she's good looking, so he thinks, okay, I'm going to go and talk to her. And this is when he notices that, hey, Hank, something's not quite right here. She's ignoring me, and I'm not in my usual body, so what's going on? So he puts more attention into this woman, and then he begins to see that he can see exactly what she's thinking and feeling, and notices that she's quite upset at what she is seeing in this hospital. He says she's quite new there and hasn't been exposed to this environment before, so what she's seeing is, taking a little bit of, it's taking a little bit of energy out of her. She's not coping with what she is with the environment that well, and I can relate to that. I've recently done a stint in a hospital for the first time as a staff member, and I was only a student, but more from a staffing perspective. Whereas in the past, I've been, like most of us, have been to a hospital and been there as a patient or visiting a family. But to be there as a carer, as someone who works there, as someone responsible for another person's health and well-being, it's difficult watching all this suffering and seeing all these sick people in front of you, and it does take a little bit out of you because they're hurting, and a lot of the time there's not too much you can do about that. Sure, you can give them some medication every few hours, but even that doesn't totally stop their suffering. And some of these people in hospital are there for a reason, because they're not very well, obviously, and they've been in some pretty bad accidents, and to be exposed to that and to have to try and help them is confronting. But I think it'll probably be a little bit like everything in life. Once you do it a little bit more and get a bit more confidence in that environment, it will become a little bit more easy to deal with. So yeah, he's watching this young lady, and this is where he sort of begins to realise that he's not where he was a few hours ago. He's not in that physical body anymore, and he's got these superpowers, I guess. He says he's able to. He then notices he's able to put his attention into any object or subject. So he can look at a rock, he can look at a wall, and he can see the history and the chemical composition and how it was mathematically formed and just see everything from a totally new perspective. And this is crazy. Uh, I have actually come across this a couple of other experiences. People are able to look at an object like a desk or something like that, and they're able to see the tree it came from and who shaped it and the sort of people who have been around that desk and the energy it's been exposed to. I think there's another experience. I can't remember whose experience that was, but I remember it being quite a vivid one and a nice one to listen to. And in this case, it's similar. He doesn't actually get the whole history of the object, but he can see what it's made of from a chemical point of view and the mathematical properties of it. So quite an interesting little skill or gift to be given when you've just died. And then he realizes he is not only looking at things like you and I do with our two eyes and in three dimensions. He's able to see everything in 360 degrees. So I've come across this every now and then in these experiences, people trying to explain exactly what seeing is like, and because all we know is, or all we remember, unless you have had a near-death experience, is this three-dimensional, two eyes, can only see frontwards looking forwards. It's difficult to try and picture what a 360 degree view is like. But I guess the main thing I take away from that is we can see as spirits or awareness or consciousness. We don't need our eyes to actually see. So that is the beauty of these near-death experiences, that what we think all comes to an abrupt end with our physical death is not the case at all. In fact, some of our senses get even a bit of a boost after we die. Like in this case, you can see all directions at once, up, down, left, right, back, front, and it's really difficult to imagine what that is like, but it's obviously an improvement on how we see things in this reality. And then the penny still hasn't dropped, I don't think. He's still, he's curious as to, or not curious, he's just baffled or confused as to what exactly is happening. He doesn't go into his spiritual beliefs or what he thought happened when he died before this experience, but I guess that doesn't really matter. He's just really surprised at this whole situation, and I probably would too, even after researching this topic, to actually be there in the flesh, so to speak, for lack of a better word, you know, to be in that spiritual body and to experience exactly what he is talking about here would be amazing. You've gone from this physical body with its limitations, and now you're in this world. All you have to do is think of something or look at something, and you get this immense amount of wealth of knowledge about it, or you can transport your awareness to any point on the globe and instantly be there. You would be surprised, to say the least. And then he notices this man lying in a bed, and he thinks, that guy over there looks a lot like me. Do I have a twin? like, what's going on here? How could I have a twin I never knew about that is in this hospital at the exact same time as me? And it still doesn't sound like, you know, and then he says he asks himself, am I dead? Is this my body on the bed? My God, my mum would be devastated. So slowly but surely, I think he's starting to work out that he is no longer in that physical body, but yet he is still alive. And this is another thing these experiences will go into detail about, is that people, when they die, they don't seem to be able to understand exactly that they're dead. And I get that. Like, if you thought this physical world is the is all there is, and suddenly you're flying around a hospital room and you're looking at the old shell or the old human you used to be in, and yet that is no longer you because you're still cruising around in this new form, I guess you would be a little bit surprised that and and because you've got all these new abilities, I guess you wouldn't put it past impossible that there was an unknown twin you knew about and was in the same place as you. But yeah, I mean, reading these experiences and knowing the perspective behind them and the backstory, it's pretty obvious for you and me to understand that this is this guy's dead body in hospital that he's seeing, and he is now in spirit form. But I guess when you're in that state, that could slip by, and there's a lot more incredible things going on, and the body you're in and your earthly life becomes a little bit secondary, and this newfound form of freedom becomes, who you are, and the curiosity in that new existence takes over, and this makes the connection to the physical world a little bit more blurry and confusing, I guess. So yeah, he thinks about his mum, and click of his fingers, boom, his awareness is instantly next to her. But he's still not, the penny still hasn't fully dropped, because he goes to give her a hug, and the hands went right through her body, and she doesn't pay any attention to him. So after this, he starts thinking about other friends, relatives. He even thinks about a teacher he used to love back in his high school days, and each time he does this, he's instantly in their presence, and he can immediately see what they're thinking, what their concerns are, how their health is, and a whole variety of skills and gifts that, we don't have as humans. I mean, wouldn't it be great if we had the awareness to be able to see our own health perfectly, to see what was going on underneath the skin of the body at all times, and know exactly what's going on and what needs to be done and fixed up, and whether we've, and the best way to go about that. It's amazing to think that this body we have is the house for this incredibly wise, gifted spirit that is in all of us. And it's frustrating too, because if this is what's in all of us, this consciousness, this intelligence, then why can't we tap into it a bit more and use the abilities that it obviously has to read people's thoughts better, to look after our health that little bit more, to understand the world around us better. It's, and it's frustrating from that point of view, because there's this gold inside you that can do that on a much better level than what our minds can, but we just can't tap into that. And that's obviously part of, I don't know, God's plan, if you want to call it that, or our plan, as we are probably individual portions of God that are currently in human form. I guess that's just part of this experience, is not having the gifts that we do as spiritual beings in these bodies, and it's what makes navigating this place pretty challenging. And I guess that's part of the reason we're here. We're not here to have a cruisy, every moment's golden type experience. We're here to experience that darkness and those challenging moments. And I know how disturbing that can sound, especially if you're in a dark place now and you're in pain, and you're thinking, why would I come here to feel this way? And I totally hear you. I get that from a human point of view. It doesn't make much sense at all, especially when you're in the middle of it. And we all go through those challenging times on a regular basis. So I understand. I hear you. I get it. I'm not feeling too bad at the moment, so I can say that and sort of understand that we would be coming here to experience something that is a little bit dissimilar to what heaven, I guess, is. Heaven seems to be a place that is a lot easier to be in. There's not as many challenges there that there seems to be on this place, and I guess you get, I don't know if tired's the right word, of being in that sort of environment, but you might want to start pushing yourself into areas that hurt and then make you struggle a little bit more to get a little bit more growth. I know from my perspective as a human, that's sort of what I'm doing at the moment. It's I spent a long time just sitting there and letting life roll by without me really getting proactive at all. Just did what I had to, didn't really try to push myself too much, and life eventually became too dark and took me over. And now that I'm sort of taking a new direction into how I tackle life, it's still not easy, but I'm finding I'm not letting life just roll over me anymore. I'm just sort of forcing myself to do things that aren't easy and aren't something I feel totally comfortable with, and it is pushing me out of my comfort zone. So doing that it's making life a little bit more interesting, but it's still hard. But when you deliberately try and take life on, I guess, and tackle your fears and push yourself into areas that you wouldn't usually push yourself, it doesn't take the pain and suffering away, but because you're almost encouraging or taking life on by the horns, you just feel a little bit more accomplishment when you're able to understand that when you do try and do something that's not too easy and you're able to do it, that you figure, okay, life isn't all that bad or scary. I just did that, and if I can do that, then I can do this, and slowly but surely you start understanding that life, it's a weird thing, and it's a challenging thing, and that's just my own personal experience of where I'm at the moment, of how I'm navigating this existence. And if I'd like to hear your stories too, if you've got any advice on how to take on life. Is it better to just sit there and meditate all day, or just sit there and read a book all day and not get out there, or is it easier to take it on and to be more proactive? I don't think easy is the right way. I just think is the right word. I think it's because when you sit there and do nothing, you're going to get bored and frustrated. But you're obviously exposed to less fearful situations, and when you take it on, you feel less frustration, but you're exposed to more fear. So it's finding that balance, I guess. And you're sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place when you look at life that way, aren't you? You can't win. So I guess when I look at those two comparisons, and I think, okay, so these are my two options. I sit here and go through the motions and get a little bit bored and a little bit frustrated. And option number two is, okay, so I try and do things that are a little bit more scary, and therefore I'm exposed to more fear. But I also get a payoff. I get that feeling of accomplishment that I've achieved something when I am able to tackle a challenge that isn't an easy thing. So when I look at it like that, boredom, frustration, not doing much versus scary things that give you a bit of a reward, I don't know, that's just the direction I seem to be pulling myself towards at the moment. And there's no right or wrong in this. I'm just relaying a little bit about how I navigating my life at the moment. And I guess there comes a time and a place where the challenges don't provide that reward, and I guess then it might be time to look for something else. And I guess there's always something that will push you in life and some direction you can try to take yourself to make yourself a better person. Even, I look at these people I work with in aged care, and they're in their 90s, and you wouldn't think they have much, you'd think that some of them might be a little bit resigned to the fact that, the end's getting near, and there's not much more they can do to make themselves or those people around you have a nicer time or make their experience better. But obviously, there's people in these places that they have different attitudes. Some will be totally absorbed in the negativity of their situation, just like you and me can be. Doesn't mean just because they're old and in an aged care that they're any different. And others will have a little bit more of a positive attitude, and generally speaking, those people have, I find, a little bit easier to be around. But I always like to come back to, there's no right or wrong or good or bad. It's just what each individual feels is their own ticket to a easier way of navigating their life, and everyone's going to have a different way of doing that. And if my experience can help you, or if what I'm saying here resonates with you in a certain way, or I don't know, I just am sharing my experience, I guess. So I'm not too sure how I got onto all that, but anyway, where are we up to in this experience? He has just travelled to a few friends and seen how their life is, that's right. And then he goes to the next stage, and he says this, he goes to this next phase, and this next phase is the tunnel, which is interesting because most people start with this part as the beginning of their near-death experience, but he is sort of chucking this part into the middle, and I like how he's done this, because it gives us an idea that when people have these near-death experiences, there's no such thing as time or chronological order. There's all these things happening at once. So, he seems to be in this tunnel while he's also in the hospital, while he's also at his mum's, while he's also at his teachers and friends. His awareness is everywhere. So being able to exactly say where you are and what's going on, like you and I can in this physical realm, is challenging, because it seems when people have a near-death experience, quite often they can be in multiple places at multiple times at once, and in this case it's exactly like that. So he's okay. So I'll describe how he describes the tunnel. Well, he doesn't actually. He just says he's moving fast through it, like towards a bright light. And as he starts moving through this tunnel, he begins to sense that, that he doesn't sense it. I guess the way okay, I'll read exactly what he says. He says his presence on Earth looked like a deportation to a stranger, an isolated island that was incompatible and unpleasant. So as he's going through this tunnel, getting closer to the light, he's starting to see his body as a shell, just a vehicle for him to experience this physical world. And he's obviously starting to feel in a better place as he's traveling through this tunnel towards the light, and beginning to actually see how, unpleasant this world has been so far for him. And the tunnel continues to go along, and time starts to begin to fade away, and all other things we see in this physical realm begin to start to disappear. So the way he describes it is there's no past or future. So everything's in the now, everything's present. Like a lot of spiritual teachers will tell us, that try to be in the now. This is where the magic of life is. Don't live in the head. Don't live in fear of what's happened in the past or what's coming up. Just try to be present. Try to be out of your mind as much as possible. But he goes on to say there's no close or far, no up or down, no darkness or light, and all relative things had lost their meaning. I think that little line there is a perfect way for us to understand, or begin to understand, what this other dimension's like. All the things that we have in this physical world are removed. So this is why understanding how these people experience this place is very difficult. All we know really for a fact is that they've been there. They're still themselves. They've still got this little ball of awareness or consciousness, and they're able to continue to experience a new dimension just without the physical body and senses we use to navigate this world. He goes on to say this place seemed to be in absolute perfection. And he says there's other souls there too. There's some that are more advanced than others, and the way he describes an advanced soul is one that is more filled with love and light. And I'd like him to have gone into a little bit more detail here. I'm kind of interested how souls become more advanced, and what that looks like, and how they get more advanced. Is it through more experiences in a physical realm? Is it through service to other souls? Is it through just the sheer fact that they've been around longer, which sounds wrong as it comes out of my mouth, because there is no longer or shorter in this other dimension. So, and then I start thinking, well, if there's no longer and shorter, how can there be a more or less advanced soul? It just, because there's nothing relative in this other dimension. So yeah, it's one of those dichotomies, I think, that just doesn't make too much sense from my point of view anyway. Then he goes into another part of an experience, and again I'll repeat what I said at the start, that this is fantastic to have this experience from someone from another culture who isn't aligned with Christian values usually anyway. I guess there's lots of Iran people who have the Christian faith, but just nice to have someone from a different culture, a different background, in a different country, relay exactly what's gone on in this experience, and have the comparisons to make with people who have had it in a country like I'm from, in Australia, which is Obviously got all that Christianity cultural background from the Caucasian section of it, and I just love the fact that this is happening to a man from Iran, and he is having a very similar experience to what other people have on in all corners of the globe. So this part of the experience, he has a contact with a guide. He says this guide has been following the whole time like a shadow. And he says that he's an amazing, divine, human-like figure who just radiates lots of love and light. And he instantly falls in love with this presence. And he firstly thinks, well, is this guy like a Jesus type figure or a prophet, as he puts it? Is he some sort of advanced spiritual master that's come to meet me in the afterlife, or is it just my God? And he says it's just his God. And he says that everyone, when they die, has a God, but some, and this bit's quite interesting, he says that some are so attached to the physical. When people die, they're so attached to this physical world and the material world, they're so connected to their money and their possessions, or even the power they had as a human, that they cross over and firstly don't even realize that they're dead, and secondly, because of that, they still continue to go on about their roles they used to as from when they were alive. Like, it gives the example of he's shown by his guide this man who continues to go to the office he used to work in every day and sign documents and sit in the same chair, oblivious to the fact that he's actually no longer here. He's no longer in his physical body, and he is just so connected to the life he lived as a human that I don't know, he can't see his guides, he can't see the light, he can't understand what's going on. And that's concerning, because you would have thought, lots of people who would be in that situation. And I guess there's no harm being in that situation, but you'd think that the universe would intervene somehow, wouldn't you? I would have thought that God or the light or family members of people who are stuck in that situation would be doing everything, wouldn't they, to reconnect with that person and to try to wake them up and get them home again. But I guess that attachment to this place is so strong for some people, and their lack of faith in what else could be there, that they just continue to refuse they're dead and somehow continue to pretend they're the human they used to be. And I don't know what happens. Like, what happens when if you are in that situation, and you're there for a long time, like hundreds of years. Wouldn't you see your partner die, or your kids grow old and die, and wouldn't you start to question why you're still going through the motions? And confusing thing, but obviously there's a lot of ghost stories and the sort out there, and I guess, the more I read about these experiences, anything's possible. This universe is a pretty weird and wonderful place, so it wouldn't surprise me if this part of this experience is true as well. Then he talks about suicide a little bit. He says that when people do commit suicide, they can tend to be more earthbound. They find it trickier to move on into the light because they're bound in this darkness they were immersed in when they took their lives. And sometimes these souls hang around and try to communicate with these loved ones they've hurt, that they've left behind for many years. But obviously, when they're in that form, it's it's hard for them to make contact. I guess some people would be more sensitive to this form of communication than others, but generally speaking, most people can't hear the dead or see the signs from the dead. So, yeah, it's a sad state of affairs if this is how it is. I mean, why doesn't God or someone help these souls when they're in this situation? It's upsetting for me because I know a few people who have killed themselves, and to think that that is potentially where they're at, it concerns me. But what can I do except ask for them to get guidance to the light if that's where they are and they need help, then I guess that's all I can do in this physical form is ask the light to come and rescue them. Then he gets a life review. So, all this experience is awesome. It's got so much in it. This review, okay, how does his review happen? He is in a movie type situation. So he's looking at his own life, and in this case, it's in chronological order. So he's seeing sometimes life reviews. They'll just be a bit from here, a bit from the childhood, then go back to the adulthood, then back to your teen years, that sort of thing. But in this case, he's watching it all from beginning to end, like he's watching his life on Earth from beginning to end, and starts with him watching this young woman who's pregnant, and this woman turns out to be her mother. And I like this next bit, how he tries to describe when exactly he comes into the body and what life was like before he came in, and because sometimes these experiences will just gloss over that. They won't go into much detail. And he says, unfortunately, he's not exactly sure when his soul, spirit, consciousness, awareness entered her body or the fetus inside her, but he reckons it's a long time before he's actually born. So that means if this is a uniform theory or concept, that means most of us would have done a similar thing, come into this world, into our mother's wombs, into the baby's body or fetus's body a long time before the baby actually comes out. So yeah, we sit in that womb, in that darkness, in that I guess it's a pretty safe and soothing environment compared to what's about to happen, isn't it? Once you get born, it's all go, go, go. You start seeing, you start hearing all these weird sounds, and it's a long, crazy life, this place. But yeah, it's just interesting to hear from his perspective what time you do actually enter that body. And he says that before he enters this body, he's got this. He's like a universal figure. He's sort of everywhere all at once. He's connected to everything, and somehow, as he's entering this baby's body, he is removed from this connectedness and becomes his own little universe and his own little ball of awareness that is no longer as connected as it once was to everything. Just like you and I know, just from our little experience here, this body we're in right now, this is what it's like for us. But on the other side, the connection is everywhere. You can't escape it. So it's another big difference between the dimension we're in and the one we've come from. Even though they say this separation, this disconnectedness that we feel like we're experiencing in these human bodies is just an illusion. When we get to the other side, we are a lot more connected, and that connection is a lot is not as hidden as it is in this world. I like the little stories he gives from his life review. He says, and this is a good lesson for all of us, and quite often we get reminded of these stories from near-death experiences in people's life review. These little things in our life that we think don't matter much at all are the ones that heaven, spirits, God, or whatever you want to call it, the universe, they're the ones that are the acts that matter the most. So those acts that are just going to help someone else are not done for your own gain. They're just random acts of kindness that are intended just to make the world a better place rather than done to give yourself, to get yourself a pat on the back. These are the little events in our lives that a lot of people come back from these life reviews and say are the ones that matter the most. So in his case, he's just a kid, really young kid. He's got a bucket of water with him, and he walks past a tree. The tree looks like it's dried out, getting close to death, and he just waters it and watches the water soak into the soil, and that's it. And he in his life review, he says the universe is just so incredibly filled with joy from this simple act, and it's like one of the best things he ever did in his life. So yeah, it's not those big things that you think are important or meaningful. I guess not. I guess some of the time these things matter a lot too, but from the spirit's perspective, it's these things that are seemingly irrelevant in our life, these things we do and then forget about. But yeah, it's food for thought. If you want to have a life review that is full of these little moments of joy, I guess keep going out there and doing acts of kindness that no one knows you actually did. And I don't know, maybe life will even get a little bit better for you too. But at the very least, you'll get a pat on the back in the afterlife. I know that's why you shouldn't do it, but yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that these things that we think are meaningless or less significant are the ones that are more powerful and have more significance when we are no longer here. The second example he gives from his life review is, so he turns out this guy was a bully. So, I bullies, I guess no one likes a bully, and it's pretty big of him to admit that he actually bullied, and he says mercilessly beat, there we go, finally got it out, another boy, tortured him. So he was, a 10-year-old kid, and I guess when you're that age, just got, there's not much life experience there, so bullying, I don't know, I never bullied myself, so I don't know the mindset for someone who does, hurt someone else from a physical point of view, and I don't get how that happens, and there's obviously reasons that they've potentially been bullied themselves or abused themselves as kids. But for a 10-year-old to go and mercilessly beat another boy is concerning, and doesn't say how he feels about that or why that came about. But in this life review, he's just reminded of this scene where he does do this, and the boy is obviously hurt emotionally and physically, and he gets to watch this boy as he walks home after this beating. And this boy has just negative energy radiating from him in every direction. And this affects not only people he comes into contact with, but the birds, the trees, even flies, he says, are affected by this negative energy. And this energy that this kid who's just been bullied, he's giving this out, and it continues to make its way all throughout the universe. And I guess when the universe is one or connected, like we hear it is from these experiences, of course, that's what's going to happen. This negative energy is going to continue to pulsate through the universe. He even says rocks on the side of the street were affected by his pain. So it gives you a bit of an idea of the reality that this physical place is not what it seems from our point of view. I mean, as humans, we just think things that move are alive, but when you are in this other dimension, you see that everything is alive, and including the rocks and inanimate objects. So, yeah, an interesting little take on this planet and how negative energy can affect things you wouldn't have thought it could. So, yeah, that wouldn't have been a pleasant thing for him to see, but I'm sure he got to see some times where he was more positive and loving too, and was able to spread some more positive vibes throughout the universe. But yeah, he doesn't mention them when he is reflecting on his life review. So he continues on. He's in this world of love and peace and light. He doesn't go into jaw-dropping detail of what this was like. I guess those three words say it all, really: love, peace, and light. Like some people will spend pretty much their whole experience exactly explaining how good that felt, and end up pretty much saying human words aren't capable of actually explaining exactly how good it was. So there he is. He's in this place of love and peace and light, and he is then starts to sense that he has to go back, and of course he's protesting. He doesn't want to come back here. It's too dark here. Too many challenges. Too hard. He wants to just stay in this place where you don't have to do anything. You can just be and experience some nice energy and not have to try so hard and all those things we know all too well as humans. But of course, he obviously ends up coming, and then the reason he actually finally changes his mind to actually come back here is because he says he's shown parts of his future where he thinks that he's able to see that his life is goes in a direction in the future where he is helping others, and his experience is able to relay some hope and positive messages. And I guess me reading that is one of the reasons, and it's just interesting to think that maybe he saw me reading this right now in his life review, and he says as he gets back to Earth, these memories of his future are erased. So yeah, when people talk about this, how they're showing glimpses of the future, it's always, it's hard for me to accept, because we all think we have our own free will so much on this place. But, I guess from this other dimension where there is no time and everything is known, I guess knowing the direction a person's life would take wouldn't be all that hard to predict. This infinite intelligence is beyond the comprehension of our minds, of how wise it is. So, and when you've seen the lives of countless people before us, it wouldn't be that hard to see the direction someone would take, or maybe it's all planned, and that's how they know. But yeah, it's hard to say, really. So he finishes up by saying that his review was, he was dead, pronounced dead, for 32 minutes. That's a fair chunk. That's a substantial amount of time to be declared dead. Some people will have an experience like this and only be dead for 30 seconds, but 32 minutes, wow. But he says this experience felt like, months, if not years to him, which is a common thing, when they're in this other dimension, there's no time. So actually saying how long you were there for is impossible, but it's just amazing to think that 32 minutes of our Earth time can feel like years in another dimension. It's just mind-boggling. And he ends by saying the usual, the ridicule, the negative judgment, the accusations of mental health problems, hallucinations, etc., he feels when he first started sharing this story. This was back in 1977, you remember, so a fair while ago, but he reckons now, slowly but surely, the tide's beginning to change. People are becoming a little bit more open to hearing what he has to say, and he's finding that it's more the younger people that are more interested in hearing about his experience and the ones who are able to keep a more open mind. So we're getting there, people, slowly but surely. These messages are becoming a little bit more mainstream and believed, and if you can go from a handful of people knowing about it, believing it, and talking about it in the 1970s and 50 years later, where we're not nowhere near where we need to be, or I would like the planet to be in terms of believing this stuff, but we seem to be heading in that direction anyway. But I need to go and get a drink of water, so I will leave you to meditate for a couple of minutes and come and finish up. It's funny, I was asking my guides, the universe, God, for some more information on what these beings that can communicate with me are. I wanted some answers. I even said to myself when I got up this morning, can I have some more information, please, on who these beings that, talk to me all the time are. And I think, this experience has given me some of those answers. It's like they're earthbound spirits and they're trapped here for whatever reason. I don't know if trap's the right word because I don't think we're ever trapped, but they're here because they don't want to lose this connection to this physical realm, and they will attach to people or places or whatever for whatever reason. And I don't know. That just seems to be an answer. So if you've got questions like that it doesn't have to be about spiritual stuff, just about anything in life, do that. Ask the universe, ask your guides for an answer and see what comes back. It might not happen for a day or a week or even a month, but something will click in your experience that will resonate as an answer to the question you've asked. So, maybe do that every morning. Just pick one thing, because if you ask the universe 10 things, you're never gonna really know the answer. There's too much going on there. So if you can just focus on what you would like the answer to, just one thing a day, and if keep asking that one thing a day until you get an answer that feels like it's right. And unfortunately, the universe isn't going to communicate in ways that we would like all the time. It's going to be come in a variety of forms. Like for me, just then reading a near-death experience, I got the answer to my question I asked this morning. But it could come in anything. It could come in a song. It could come from someone saying something to you that stands out as a bit more profound than what you would take at face value. And when you get those sort of experiences, you need to pay attention to what your intuition is saying, and realize that, and open your mind and heart to the possibility that there is more to what is happening than meets the eye. And you got to have that belief as well, because obviously if you don't believe that this is possible, you'll never notice it. So there's a few things there to consider if you do want to improve that connection and get some questions answered. But this has been a fairly long one now, so I think I'll just wrap it up there. Thank you for listening. If you want to talk to me about anything at all, just send me an email. My email is podafterlife@gmail.com. Thanks for getting through to the end of this long episode, and I hope you're having a good time in life at the moment. And if you're not, just ask for some help, ask for some assistance, and see what the universe comes back with. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you next week. Love you all. Goodbye.